what is the topic?
Meet them where they're at.
Meet them where they're at. So the idea there is to meet them where they're at. What I'm referring to there is other people, but also your own thought patterns. Meet them where they're at. Your situations that arise in your life that may not have that much to do with another person, relationships, but just maybe anything from the weather to anything else. When I say meet them where they're at, I'm saying it may take a lot of attention, a lot of work, or a lot of insight, because quite often this is what we're doing when we're meeting. We meet someone or something or some situation. We're meeting it where we think it's at, which is right here. This is what we think, and this is how we often live our life. This is how you look to me when I talk to you. Am I making a claim for something about myself?
You're ignoring.
What was my question?
Am I making a claim about myself
Yeah. What was your statement?
that you're ignoring?
I'm not ignoring anything. Are you?
Pretty much all the time. Yeah.
How do you know that?
Because you told me.
That's a sneaky way to wiggle out of it. Very sneaky. So what I'm saying is not a condemnation or particularly a criticism of anyone. I'm just saying that when I talk to someone, say in the Hojo, in the interview room, when I talk to someone, I quite often see where they're at, because I've just spent close to 50 years trying to find out where the hell I'm at. Find out who this is, what that is. Find out what it is fundamentally. This is what the sitting practice of meditation that we're doing this morning, and we were doing yesterday in the all-day retreat, the session, is sitting down and is stretching that mind, that awareness that would rather get up and go out and play golf or do something else, do something entertaining, something fun, or something educational. So in order to meet anything where it's at, first we have to practice on ourselves where, pardon me, and meet ourselves where we're at. Actually meet your thoughts where they're at, instead of taking what arises and adding to it, changing it into something else so it's more digestible or less threatening. But to actually practice meeting your mind where it's at. If you're meeting your mind where it's at, it probably feels pretty crappy quite often, especially if you're new, if you've only been meditating for a few years. Anything under 3 or 4 years of meditation, unless you're sitting all day long every day, anything under that is still has some work to do. Generally speaking, I can't condemn everyone. You might have been born a bodhisattva. Your past 3 incarnations have been slowly working up to this, and you just got into this lifetime, and now you're ready to awaken in your first 3 days of meditation retreat. And sure, I'm making fun of that in a way, but there's some humor there, a little bit. Maybe I'm not finding it too well. But meet everything, meet your mind where it's at. Sit down and be genuine. Be who you are. Whatever thoughts arise, don't accept them, don't reject them, don't look away. Don't accept them. Oh, I'll just have to be this. Don't reject it. Add thoughts onto it that means it should leave, it shouldn't be there. And don't look away or distract yourself into something else. Try to find out some way to abandon whatever is arising. That smells like pond water.
Trying to clean the pitcher.
Time to meet it where it's at. Glug, glug, glug. So I'll take questions in a few minutes. I need to develop something a little further. And if I take questions, meet you where you're at. And then I don't know what this talk was even about, because then we go into what you want the talk to be, which is nothing wrong with that. I like that. I like questions. But I want to develop that a little further. Meeting Meeting things when they're where they're at can be extremely difficult. Even if you've been doing it, if you've been working on it for 15, 20, 30 years, 40 years, it can be very, very difficult. And it never really gets easy. It just gets more elaborate and more, simple at the same time. It's challenging to have some insight into how this works. It's very challenging to find a way to bring that into concepts and into words without losing the original inspiration that was there. Very difficult to do that. We've all been at a loss for words. The feeling you might have when you're beginning to meet things where they're at, let's say another person where they're at, you might be speechless. This is not incorrect. It isn't like when someone says something, it isn't like you have to respond. You could just listen. And you could also notice that nothing is coming back. You don't have to necessarily fill it up with stuff. You can actually allow that vacuous feeling to be there. You could meet your own mind where it's at, meet the other person where he or she is at. To meet someone in their confusion is not to point out their confusion. To meet someone there in their confusion is not to be separate from their confusion. To meet someone in their confusion and see no self, no other, it's compassion. It's just about impossible to accomplish because we are so ready to go to war with things. Just at the, what is that old saying, at the drop of a hat? No one has any hats, so that helps. We're so ready to, yesterday there was give you my experience yesterday. I'm in the Hojo with, who was I in there with when I went out to see what all the racket was outside? Is that person here? Huh? Might have been William. I think he's probably watching, along with Moodles, his daughter. But I heard this noise and I thought, well, that can't be people from the Zendo out there. But maybe if it is, I need to ask them, tell them, what do I mean ask? Tell them to move that conversation elsewhere. But I went outside, it was the people next door, right up close to the fence, having a really loud chat. And so I got there and then they turned and saw me and then two of them left. I'm very frightening. And the one unfrightened person I had met before, he's, what is the fellow's name that lives? Brad. Not Brad, he's the owner.
Sky.
Huh?
Sky.
Skylar, yeah, it was Skylar. He said, we've met before. I said, yes. I said, I'm not, don't mean to be disrespectful. I just came out to see, I heard a kind of a racket out here, and then he took offense to me calling this conversation with his peeps racket. So I said, oh, no disrespect, meant, and then he started doing the same thing. Oh no, it's okay. We're cool, that kind of thing. So, but I have to say that my first thing that arose for me was irritation at, a bunch of noise outside the window. So I went with that. Don't really have to get rid of irritation, but you can actually go and see what it is rather than make assumptions about it. So it's a very simple situation. It won't necessarily provide you with some kind of credential about how wonderful you are. It might provide you with something about how easily you're irritated. So meeting people where they're at, in my situation as a Dharma teacher, I meet a lot of people, face to face, and not only on the phone, but on Skype and on through emails, you could say, through texting, face to face in the interview room. And I have yet to meet two people that were anywhere near the same. We have all these different kinds of people and all different kinds of ideas about themselves and about others. People are just full of themselves, and they're full of you. They're full of ideas about who you are. You can sense it. You can feel it. People come in and just like they're inventing things for themselves. They're also projecting on you. When people talk to you, talk to me, they're actually talking to their idea of me. They can't see who I am, but I can see who they are. And it's not a claim. It's not some kind of claim of, maybe you guys can't do it, but I can see who you are. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's just there. It's just apparent. And it comes probably from many, many years of looking at this crazy mind that is here, looking at it and not fighting it, not accepting it, not rejecting it. Just a willingness to be what? Crazy. A willingness to finally not fight, argue, dismiss, challenge, do anything with the mind that is arising, but just see what it is fundamentally. Very interesting. Did Steve leave? Oh, left his coffee. left some traces. That's a good one. So I could give several talks on this. So meeting someone where they're at has all kinds of things, happening there. If it's your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend, we tend to have difficulty, especially the more intimate the relationship gets, we have difficulty not projecting onto that out of some kind of an emotional bias that has been built up over time. Very difficult. It can be very tense. Some people maintain their relationship through ignoring each other. I had parents that did that. That's how they stayed together for 40 years. They might get congratulated for being in a long relationship, but it's the way they did it was just out of fear of leaving it. So that's how they maintain. Very interesting area. I'll take your question now.
How is not ignoring something meeting ignorance where it's at?
So there isn't any kind of, it isn't particularly meeting ignorance where it's at. It's very simple. If you're there and you're not ignoring, you're not shutting down on it, then it's just there. It's just what it is. It may have different particles on top of it that are your ideas about it, but they tend to be less and less. The more you're just sincere and you're interested in just being with whatever is there, just like our bodhisattva vow, the way we say it, rather than say a vow to save all beings, we say we vow to be with all things. In other words, we're all through fighting with everything. We're going to meet everything insofar as we can where it's at. And that may be, the initial part of that may be a whole lot of laminations on top of it that we may begin to look at and see through. So you can't just take a hold of them and move them. You have to actually see that you're projecting onto someone. And that projection may never stop. This is just the amazing thing about it. You may never stop projecting. You might just be aware that you're projecting. More?
We talked about yesterday how about we're aware of something after the fact. So if it's after the fact, the habit energy is already the case. How can we meet it where it's at then?
Just keep sitting. That's still awareness, what you're saying. That's still sitting, and nothing lasts. Nothing stays the same. Even awareness of various objects that are rising and falling away won't stay there. It's always in flux. There's some kind of motion happening all the time. As long as there's a path, there's flux and movement.
When you're not separate from someone else's confusion, how does a person like me, someone that...
You see, a person like you, that's really a challenge. Go ahead.
So I am their confusion. How can I...
No, let's not get too philosophical.
Okay.
Make it a straight question. That way I won't get confused.
How can I... What should I do with that confusion that I am meeting?
Nothing. Just see it. It's like watching bubbles in the water. Just watch it. If you just look at the texture of the confusion, if you don't do anything with it, you don't name it, you don't do anything extra. It's just coming out of causes and conditions. It's very impersonal until you give it a personality. You give it a story. You attach your own soap opera to it.
I find myself being confused, and that person then goes, but the confusion's still there. And
That's awareness.
so how can I meet this person where they're at when this confusion is still lingering?
That's still awareness. You're there. You've got this confusion. That's still. You see that there's something happening there that is that you see it so clearly. You're not likely to lay that confusion on the next person. It just might not be very comfortable.
In my situation, I'm constantly meeting, beings this big and beings this big, and eventually,
Children and adults.
yeah, I find myself having just this storm inside of me.
Yeah.
And I just don't know what to do with it.
How many hours of sitting do you put in each week?
Each week, maybe 5.
You can't do it without you've got to train the mind to hold still and watch. You've got to train the mind to hold still and watch what moves. Because what's happening is you get drawn into that. Your awareness, your thinking process, you're not clear about which is which. You don't trust the openness of awareness. You don't actually trust you could say it this way, your Buddha nature. You keep shutting down your Buddha nature and you opt for some kind of surface logic about something on cause and effect. And that's why all evidence is partial. Because even if somebody stabs you with a knife, even if somebody stabs you with a knife, I'll say it again, even if somebody stabs you with a knife, that's obvious evidence, isn't it? I mean, is that partial evidence? Yes, it is. That's because you don't know where the knife came from. You don't know where the hand came from. You cannot find the original source of anything. I'm not saying in that particular situation, this person didn't stab this person or stab you. I'm saying that in the previous lifetime, you stabbed them. In the lifetime before that, they stabbed you. And this is not something to be believed or disbelieved. But I've been talking to people face to face since 1978 when I was trained as a meditation instructor. I no longer do anything anywhere near what I was trained to do. But I've spent a lot of time sitting down face to face and listening to people. And I've spent a lot of time sitting down and looking at the wall or looking at the floor or looking at visualizations and looking at what happens here and then what happens out there, what happens here, what happens out there. You follow me?
Best I can, sir.
Okay. So we can't find the original cause of anything, but we're so desperate for some kind of credential or some kind of something to authenticate our feelings. Well, I feel this way because, well, it's called samsara, constant wheel of life and death and life and death. And if you want to ask questions about past lives, I can address that. Yes.
Is there a jump that needs to be made between meeting our projections where they're at and meeting the actual thing behind the projection where it's at?
Is there a what being made?
Is there a jump that needs to be
I think
made?
there's something that happens there. I don't know if it's a jump. It might be a creep or a crawl or a sneak. It might be a neek. Unique.
How
How
do
do
we
you-
sneak up on it?
You sneak up on it, tame way. So,
How do
But-
we make that jump? Or
yeah,
whatever?
I think it's just being insistent on knowing what is true yourself. Being insistent on knowing, and sometimes that requires letting go. It's not an actual letting go. It's just a lack of fixating or solidifying some kind of opinion or idea and retreating into that called ignorance. So just being there and having a willingness to be vulnerable. I know Maria Bardowska had some questions about vulnerability, which are difficult to talk about that because to each person, vulnerability means something different. To some people, not even sure what that means. They don't necessarily feel that way. And other people are completely swamped by their vulnerability. More? Jesse?
How do we relax and dance with a situation I'll just say, how do I relax and dance with a situation when in that time my mind is so bogged down by things that are your teachings, which I translate into like rules and right and wrong.
When do I
Do
say
this,
right now?
Don't do that. You don't, I'm saying
You translate it.
It's easy to translate this stuff
Yeah.
into right and wrong, rules,
Mhm.
forms, obey, disobey.
Mhm.
And
How can I help you there?
how do you,
I'll start this way. Stop that. Go ahead.
well, how do you
Yeah.
dance with that situation? Or even have a sense of humor when your mind is
See, and look
acting
at,
crazy on the crazy.
yeah, and what you're actually telling me is you're actually looking at the issue, you're looking at the structure, you're looking at the need for a sense of humor, you're looking at the craziness that seems to be like Velcro that you can't pull away from, because then that feels like war. So what I'm hearing is your mind is already there, seeing the issue and how difficult that is. And I think everyone goes through some form of this kind of thing. But what seems to be necessary is, in your situation, sit more. So that the seeing part, which is already pretty strong, just gets stronger. So that you don't, the tendency to, there's less of a lapse between the time you begin to see the sinkhole ahead of you and when you get to it. So you can actually see if you go there, you're going down. You're going into a labyrinth of pain and suffering, and I'm sure you've noticed once you succumb, or once you that happens to you, it just sometimes takes hours, if not days, to get back out of that kind of a tar pit. So the awareness, though, will allow you to see it. I sometimes talk when I'm teaching addiction awareness meditation depending on someone with addiction problems, that you need to see, your awareness needs to be so strong, which is you can't see it. You can't see awareness, so you don't know. The only way you know how strong your awareness is if you're strengthening that, so that it's out in front of your thinking process. Then you will see the bad neighborhood coming. You'll see it quite a ways away. You'll see it, and that's going to manifest in so many different kinds of ways. And how do you work with that? You find ways. You sit. You find ways of working with the mind that help you see more clearly what those triggers are and when those are starting to happen. And to see that someone doing something actually is not what they're doing. They're actually triggering something that you have not looked at. I've talked about this with a lot of people. Something that actually is trapped there and could take lots of forms. That's also something I can address if people want to ask questions about it. So the awareness seems to need to be really, really primary. And the only way we can do that is do this exercise of invisible muscles, where we can't really tell, we can't really see the awareness. There's really no credential operating there. Where there is, if you actually lift weights, you get the credential, you get muscles. You jog, you get the credential. If you study the violin, you'll get the credential of being able to play the violin. But if you practice meditation, there you get the credential of being very, very aware of everything that's going on. And it is not a credential. You barely even know you have it. The way you know you have it is you can see craziness in yourself, which you don't have to get rid of because there is no self. And you can see it vividly in others. You can see it so vividly that it's painful to see, especially when you know that you cannot help someone without their permission. They have to actually come to you, and even then, quite often they're lying. They just want you to see how smart they are. See, here's what I know about myself, and I know this. I just want to share this with you, this and this and this and this. I'm not saying it's a waste of my time, but they're not making use of what I am able to do, not because I'm such a wonderful guy. It's because I'm nobody. You're very lucky to meet nobody.
How can you look at that thing that's so deeply hidden, it only comes out when it's triggered? If you're not in the situation, if you're sitting on the cushion and not in a situation where it will be triggered necessarily.
Yeah, it's a good. I think I think you're probably closer to it. I know you're kind of separating it as two different things, and that does happen. But at some point, the boundary between sitting practice and your everyday life just vanishes, and it isn't. All you notice is that you don't need to sit. Why sit? You only sit if you're miserable, or if you're upset, or if you're confused, if you're not sure about something, or if you don't have any confidence. Now, I'm not talking about relative confidence that you can lose. You can have confidence in being like a great golfer, like what's that golfer that did really well for a while, now he's not doing so well. Yeah, see, great confidence. I'm sure he's completely baffled, and he just has to talk to his astrologer. She'll tell him. He'll tell him. And when I say that, it's just because everything is going in cycles, completely impersonal cycles that are happening. You know, if you're looking at the very thing that you're talking about, you'll begin to see that in a way that the separation between those two things it just won't be there anymore because of this. There's so much awareness there. And you won't, I'm not saying you won't come here, but it'll be a different situation when you come here, rather than someone who's trying to awaken, trying to understand, trying to deal with their aggression. You'll be more about what's happening with everybody else. Not really concerned about what happens to you anymore. Yes.
From Sandro in New York.
Yes, Sandro.
He asks, are we confused when we think helping other beings means doing something?
Yeah, you don't have to do it. I mean, you aren't separate from other beings. Awaken. You want to help others? Forget the picket sign. Forget the protest sign. Forget marching in the street. There's plenty of people that are doing that already. Let them do that part. Your job, if you're in this room, if you're listening to me, I'm telling you, you're giving me permission to tell you. When you can leave, you can do whatever the hell you want. But right now, I'm telling you, train your mind. If you want to help literally uncountable numbers of living beings, awaken. Find out what that is. Find out what it is to be completely. Find out what it is to not be separate from anyone, anywhere, including Vladimir Putin. No longer separate. Yes.
His second follow-up. So you see separate and one at the same time.
It's not quite that philosophical, Sandro. Yeah. You would not to respond to the question. I would say yes, but to respond to it in a way that. In its actuality, you don't see much of anything.
Question from Jay.
Jay?
Up in Saginaw. He says, asks, I become extremely irritated by people who like to show off what they think they know after seeing it in myself. How do I meet the irritation? So while also meeting the person.
I think, knowing Jay, I think you're probably already doing it. But you're looking for a credential. There is no credential. Looking for some way to show that you're actually doing what you're asking about, and it may feel terrible forever. Well, not forever, but about 15 minutes before forever gets over. There's some kind of conditionality to it that seems to happen until there's not, and when there's not, then there's no difference between pain and suffering. I'm not saying there's no difference fundamentally. Of course there is. Something feels good, something hurts. But the nature of it is the same. And you begin to see that. And the very nature of you and other beings is the same and different. Sandokai, the equality of sameness and difference. This is why was it Sekito Kisen? Was he the one in the 8th century that wrote that? I think Tozan Rilkai wrote the Song of the Jewel of Mirasamani, so it's probably Sekito. But I'm sure somebody out there will correct me, or maybe in here. So the idea, though, is that we begin to see that things are the same and different at the same time. It's kind of a shocking and ordinary. Other questions on Anna Maria?
Can an intense reaction that you have to something be like what you said, just the contrast of seeing the neurosis so vividly, which seems to be necessary in awareness?
Paraphrase yourself, simplify that.
Okay. I have an intense reaction to something.
Yes. What's the question about?
I always go to, I'm just overreacting, I'm freaking out.
Mm-hmm. Stop that.
Okay.
Not stopping the freaking out. Stop going to your interpretation of it. This is exactly what happens is a puff adder, and you do something with it. You run away, you kill it, or you pretend it's not there. probably not a very good example. But I mean, it's something arises. I'm trying to make a simple kind of silly example because you have to work with it like that. The intense feeling and emotion arises, and even though it feels like something clawing at you because it's so painful, it doesn't work to say don't take it personally because we're already past that point. I mean, you're already on the subway and you're going to hell. In terms of going into your emotional torture chamber where you, combined with all the other things you're not separate from, start to take issue with everything and start to beat yourself up or beat others up, which is very similar. And what's being said is, don't add anything to it. You may have to go through certain things. There are certain passages that you may have to go through. Now, if somebody comes to me and says, well, I'm married to somebody who beats me, I'm not going to tell that person, you may just have to go through the beatings. I would say, no, leave. But they may not be able to leave. Their tie into that person may be so difficult to see what it is that they may be drawn into that. Not because I would say do that. And same thing with a similar thing to what you're saying there is that intense people have a different level of intensity when it comes to feelings, different ways of working with it. It's so complicated. And it's complicated in ways that I'm not even mentioning. I didn't even mention how complicated this gets when I'm talking to people in the Hojo. People are extremely complex in terms of having lots of moving parts that are all assumed to be true and false. True and false. We cling to true and false. We cling to opinions. We cling to ideas. We don't see the power of just not believing in anything and not disbelieving in anything, which does what? It makes the awareness just starts to shine when there's no positionality. And so that's your opportunity. Not making light of your emotions or your feelings. We've talked a lot about this, and I know some of the stuff that you have had to go through, difficult stuff. But on the other hand, insofar as you're able, hold your seat. Practice a lot. You do practice a lot. So sit, practice, and when anything arises, add nothing to it, take nothing away from it. Passion, aggression, and don't look away from it. And the beginning of that quite often is seeing how much you add, which is what you just described. You actually described the way in which you're adding something onto that, like using your intellect, using your thought process. Until you see that you're doing that, it won't slow down or cease. But if you see that you're doing that and you don't do anything extra by trying to stop that emotion, stop that thought, stop it. But if you just let it be what it is, then it begins to lose its fuel. It's my way of saying it. Because what fuels aggression, passion, aggression, and ignorance is more passion, aggression, and ignorance. Like seeing something at war and then trying to go to war with that. You see the warfare in yourself, we try to go to war with it, or we try to cover it up. And if you go to get professional help, quite often they don't want to go in and investigate your consciousness. They don't want to go down into your consciousness and help you go down and see what's happening. I'm not saying everyone. There's some psychotherapists, hypnotherapists, and so on that work in a deeper way. But quite often, professionals want to cover that up. And don't misunderstand me here. I'm not saying that's incorrect. With some people, that's the only approach you can take to this particular dynamic is to help that person soften that up, or they could kill themselves or something like that. So the right and wrong part is not important. What is important is bring as much awareness to it as you can, and then if you do that, then by meeting someone where they're at, you'll know. If you've met yourself, where you're at, and you understand who you are on some kind of level you can't even explain, then when you come in someone else comes in your presence, you're just spontaneously there. You're there. You're not there as some kind of super identity that knows them or as a mind reader, but you're just there, and it could be very simple. You're just there with them.
So in meeting a situation,
Yeah.
where it's at, there is something happens, I have an intense reaction.
Yes.
That's it.
Except you don't say I have an intense reaction. Don't bring your personal identity into it. I'm the person having this intense reaction, or I'm the person that's working with this so well, or I'm the person that sucks at working with this. No, nothing added. Nothing added. You need to get very bad at math. Just be there. Add nothing to it. You're just in a boat by yourself. You don't have any oars. You don't have a motor. You don't know whether you're floating on water or on air. You're just there. In your case, you're a Libra. You're probably floating on air. And you're also using that dynamic as just as another way of looking at the mind, as you're very much about balancing everything. Forget it. Drop off body and mind. Just this. Drop off body. Doesn't mean your body disappears. Doesn't mean your mind disappears. But you no longer put any stock in your body as being any more important than anybody else's. Yes, we
We
got to
have
quit.
to, we have to stop.
So we have daily Dharma gathering starting in 10 minutes. So we're a little bit over time
Yeah,
here.
so we'll dedicate the minute.
So please stay if you want to. This is supposed to be a talk about relaxation, but I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Why is that funny?
Doesn't seem like something you would necessarily teach about.
Oh, yeah.
So in the back of your chant books is our dedication of merit. And as usual, our donation boxes are out in the hallway. Please help us. Or online through PayPal. We had someone donate $1 to us
Well, that was nice.
recently, so that helps.
You can use that.
May the miracles penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jio San Chi Shizon Musa Moko San Moko the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
The Buddhas, the 10 directions, and the 3 times, including the 5 wisdom Buddhas, Vairochana, Akshobhya, Amitabha, Ratnasambhava, Amoghasiddhi, and their consorts, please hear us. To the Bodhisattvas, Samantabhadra, Vajrapani, Avalokiteshvara, Ratnapani, Vishvapani, and the protector, Jizo Bodhisattva, please hear us. We ask you, supplicate you all to bring down the light to heal and protect all of the Sangha, the students and practitioners, the family and friends of Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, its buildings, houses, rooms, and everything in the gardens and adjoining grounds from any negative energy or the dark forces. Bring down light and protect us now.